Carlos Santana wasn't the kind of person who talked down to people. That wasn't his style. He was raised to be careful with words, careful with people, careful with the kind of statements that can't be taken back once they're out in the air. But he believed what he believed. And what he believed in the summer of 1969 was that Latin rhythm was not something you could just pick up. It wasn't a technique. It wasn't a scale you practiced until your fingers memorized it. It lived in a specific place, in the body, in the blood, in years of hearing it before you ever touched an instrument. You either grew up inside it or you didn't. And Jimi Hendrix, as far as Carlos Santana could tell, had not. Woodstock was 3 days of organized chaos. That's the kindest way to put it. The festival had grown far beyond what anyone planned for, and backstage the feeling was somewhere between excitement and controlled panic. Roads were jammed. Helicopters were the only reliable way in or out. Food was running short. Rain had turned the fields into something resembling a swamp. The backstage area had a temporary, improvised quality to it. Plywood and tarps, equipment cases stacked in rows, cables running in every direction across wet grass. People moved quickly and spoke in short sentences, the language of people managing something that was already larger than the plan. But none of that mattered much to the musicians. Backstage, in the hours before their sets, they did what musicians always do. They found a quiet corner, plugged into something small and played. Not for anyone, just to keep their hands warm and their heads clear. Carlos Santana was scheduled to perform on the afternoon of August 16th. His band had never played a crowd this size. They had never played a crowd close to this size. The pressure was sitting on his chest like a weight he was pretending wasn't there. He was rehearsing with his percussionists, Jose Arias on timbales, Mike Carabello on congas. They were running through a CLAVE pattern, the 3-2 structure that was the skeleton of everything Santana did. That rhythm was where his music started. Before the guitar riffs, before the solos, before anything else. There was the CLAVE, steady and relentless and old in a way that rock and roll wasn't old. Jimi Hendrix was somewhere nearby. He had arrived quietly, the way he usually arrived at things, not making an entrance, just appearing. He was scheduled to close the entire festival, the last act on the last day, and there was no tension in him that anyone could see. He was sitting on a road case about 20 feet away, white Stratocaster across his lap, not really playing, just resting his fingers on the strings. Santana noticed him, but didn't stop playing. A few minutes passed. Then Jimi stood up and walked over. "That's beautiful," Jimi said. He was watching the percussionists. His eyes moved between Jose's hands and the conga pattern Mike was laying down. Santana looked up from his guitar. "You know this rhythm?" Jimi shook his head. "Not really, I've heard it. Never played it." There was nothing arrogant in what Santana said next. That's worth understanding. It came from a genuine place, from something he had watched happen over and over with guitar players who drifted toward Latin music from the outside. Curious but rootless. "It's not something you can just pick up," Santana said. "This comes from somewhere specific. You have to grow up hearing it." Jimi didn't argue. He just nodded slowly, looking at Mike's hands. "Can I try something?" he asked. Santana gestured toward the space beside him. "Sure." He expected Jimi to sit down at a drum. That's usually what happened. Someone would try to tap along, lose the pattern in a few bars, laugh it off. But Jimi didn't sit down at anything. He just stood there holding his guitar. "Keep playing," Jimi said. Mike started the clave again. 3-2. 3 strokes, a rest, 2 strokes. Simple on paper, built into the muscle memory of everyone in that circle. Jimi closed his eyes. He stood there for 1 full bar, just listening. Then another bar. His right hand didn't move. His left hand hung loose at the neck of the guitar. Santana watched him and waited. Then Jimi started to play. The first 3 notes were careful, tentative even. He was feeling the edges of the rhythm, not committing to anything yet. The way you test the temperature of water before stepping in. Santana kept his expression neutral. Then something shifted. It was subtle at first. Jimi's right hand found a different angle on the strings, and the attack changed. Lighter, more percussive, the pick barely grazing the surface. He wasn't playing through the rhythm. He was playing inside it. He found the spaces between Mike's conga strokes and placed notes there, not to fill the silence, but to breathe with it. And then the guitar started to ring, not in the way a Stratocaster usually rings in a rock context, wide and bright and forward. It rang in a lower, rounder way. Jimmy had turned his tone knob back without anyone noticing, and now the guitar had a warmth to it that didn't belong to 1969 and didn't belong to London and didn't belong to any Marshall stack in any arena. It sounded like something much older. Mike looked up from the congas. He didn't stop playing, but his eyes found Carlos, and in that look was a question neither of them said out loud. Santana stopped playing. He hadn't decided to. His hands just stopped. He stood there holding his guitar while Jimmy played around the clave, finding voicings between the beats that seemed impossible to find in real time. He made the Stratocaster answer the percussion like a voice in a conversation, not leading it, not following it, but moving alongside it the way two people walk together without deciding who sets the pace. Nobody in that corner said anything. One of the roadies who had been moving equipment nearby put down what he was carrying. He stood still and listened. Jimmy played for maybe 3 minutes. Not a song, just a meditation on that one rhythm. When he stopped, he looked down at his guitar the way you look at something that has surprised you. The clave stopped too. Silence. Not the silence of an audience waiting for the next thing. The silence of people who have just heard something they weren't prepared to hear and haven't processed it yet. Santana didn't say anything immediately. He looked at his own hands, at the guitar still hanging from his shoulder. He was aware of a specific feeling. Not quite embarrassment, not quite awe, but something that sat between those two things uncomfortably. He thought about the years, not in a sentimental way, but practically. He had been playing this music since he was a child in Outland and Navarro. He had heard the rhythm before he knew what rhythm was, heard it in kitchens and street corners, and in the way his family spoke. It was not separate from him. It was part of how he understood the world. And he had walked into this conversation confident that this understanding was a wall, something with an outside and an inside. You were either in or you weren't. He had said it wasn't something you could just pick up. Jimmy had picked it up. Not perfectly, not in the way Santana played it, not with the years of accumulated understanding that lived in his body, but he had found something true in it, something honest. And the most disorienting part was that he had found things in that rhythm that Santana himself had never thought to find. Those voicings, the way the guitar answered the drums instead of competing with them, the space Jimmy left, deliberate and shaped, not empty. You said you've never played this before, Santana said. It wasn't really a question. No, Jimmy said. Santana nodded. He turned and looked at the field beyond the fence, at the hundreds of thousands of people out there, at the gray sky above all of it. I think I was wrong about something, he said. Jimmy didn't ask what. For a moment, the only sound was the distant noise of the crowd beyond the fence. 400,000 people who had no idea what had just happened in a corner of the backstage area. The world out there hadn't changed at all, but something in this small circle had shifted quietly. The way things shift when a question you didn't know you were asking finally gets answered. Santana played that afternoon and delivered one of the performances of his life. The crowd, which hadn't known his name when he walked on stage, was on its feet by the second song. It was the moment that launched everything for him. The record deal, the recognition, the years that followed. He walked off the stage into the backstage area, and someone handed him a towel, and someone else was already talking about reviews and set lists and who had been in the audience. But what he was thinking about was 3 minutes in a corner before any of that happened. He was thinking about Jimmy standing still with his eyes closed, listening to a rhythm he had never played, finding the truth in it before he ever touched a string. Santana had spent years building his relationship with that rhythm. He had earned it, and that still meant something. But what Jimmy had done was different. He hadn't learned the rhythm. He had heard the rhythm, really heard it, the way you hear something when you're not trying to master it, when you're just listening with everything quiet inside you. And in 3 minutes, he had shown Santana something about his own music that Santana hadn't seen. That stayed with him. 25 years later, in a 1994 interview with a music magazine, The writer asked Santana about the musicians who had most influenced how he thought about the guitar. He mentioned the usual names. Then he paused. There was a moment at Woodstock, he said. Backstage before I played, Jimmy was there. I made a comment, something like, "This rhythm isn't for everyone. You have to come from it." I wasn't being unkind. I meant it honestly. And he didn't argue with me. He just played. The writer asked what happened. Santana was quiet for a moment. He found things in that rhythm that I'd been playing for years and never found, he said. Not because he was better than me. He wasn't playing better than me. But he was listening in a way I'd stopped listening. When you know something well enough, you stop hearing it. You just play it. He heard it. And because he heard it, he showed me something I'd missed. He paused again. I said the rhythm wasn't something you could just pick up. I was thinking about it wrong. The rhythm isn't in the technique. It's in the listening. And that's available to everyone. Jimi Hendrix closed Woodstock on the morning of August 18, after most of the crowd had already left. He played to whoever remained. He played for almost 2 hours, and before he was done, he played the national anthem in a way that no one has ever fully explained and no one has ever replicated. Carlos Santana was not in the audience that morning. He had already gone. But years later, when people asked him about Jimmy, he always came back to the same moment. Not the Woodstock performance, not the famous recordings, not the stage theatrics that became legend. 3 minutes backstage, a clave rhythm, a Stratocaster turned down low, and a lesson about listening that Santana said he was still learning. Music doesn't belong to anyone, he said once, in a different interview, in a different decade. That was something I had to understand. I thought I owned that rhythm because I came from it. But you can't own music. You can only meet it. Jimmy met it. He met everything he played. That's the difference. He left it there. Some things don't need a longer explanation.